Hey, how about some blatant positivity about 1D&D? That's right, I'm going to tell you about my favorite D&D rules update so far and why you're probably going to start using it immediately in your games. Because I'm Bob, this is where we learn how to have more fun playing D&D together. And hear me out, for the few folks who are already a little tired with all the 1D&D news, remember that 1D&D and this video is just another fun homebrew idea. It just so happens that this homebrew was written in an office building in Seattle. And the first thing I want to clarify is that this homebrew rule is not entirely new, it is just an update to one of the weirdest conditions in D&D. Weird because it's impossible to memorize, it's not used very often, and most of the time it does actually come up, it's barely noticeable, but then it suddenly gets terrifying because it scales pretty badly. Yeah, I'm talking about exhaustion. But before we break down the 5e exhaustion rules, I challenge you to leave a comment below describing the effects for each level of exhaustion to see if anyone out there truly does have it memorized. And while you're doing that, I'm going to tell you about our amazing longtime channel sponsor, Describe. Describe is an online library of professionally written box text that you can easily search while you're prepping for your next session or on the fly during your session to find a snippet of cinematic flavor for locations, monsters, spells, NPCs, items, and more. They even have cool interactive maps that you can use in your game. Check it out for free or sign up for Describe with the link below and code BOB to save 10%. Alright, let's see how you did. Exhaustion. Some special abilities and environmental hazards, such as starvation and the long-term effects of freezing or scorching temperatures, can lead to a special condition called exhaustion. Exhaustion is measured in 6 levels. An effect can give a creature 1 or more levels of exhaustion as specified in the effect's description. So far, that mostly checks out. Exhaustion is typically caused by not resting, extreme heat or cold, which are both pretty rare, and not having food or water, which is really rare because nobody cares about the food-water rules of D&D except all those people who were surprisingly mean about my approach to testing those rules in real life. But the thing that confused me about exhaustion here is that it says an effect can give a creature 1 or more levels of exhaustion, and I don't think I've ever read an effect that caused more than 1 level of exhaustion at a time. Usually it's just level 1, disadvantage on ability checks, then maybe level 2, speed halved, and almost never level 3, disadvantage on attack rolls and saving throws, and I really don't think I've ever seen it reach this point, but level 4, hit point maximum halved, level 5, speed reduced to 0, and level 6, death. That's what I meant by scaling badly. 5e exhaustion is a minor inconvenience at levels 1 and 2, because one player character having disadvantage on checks does not affect the party at all. And as long as you can move, your movement speed doesn't usually affect the game either. Level 3's disadvantage on attacks and saves is definitely an inconvenience to that one player character, making them a weak link for the party as well. Then suddenly, the party has to drop everything and save this character because they're half dead, then they can't move, and then oh my god, they're actually just dead. The next parts just explain that the levels and their effects are cumulative and that long resting or being raised from the dead reduces a creature's exhaustion level by 1. I never noticed that part before either, and it's weird for 2 reasons. First, it means you maintain levels of exhaustion even if you're dead, and second, it kind of implies that death is like its own subcondition of exhaustion, such that if your character dies but is revived, they should also have 5 levels of exhaustion? I don't know, that is kind of a stretch, and I've never heard of anyone using it that way, but it would make coming back from death somewhat severe instead of just immediately being ready to continue the adventure, which is how I think most people run it in 5e. So the pros. Exhaustion creates consequences for failing to sleep, eat, drink, and dress appropriately for the weather, but these are only pros if you like a gritty game. Cons. Low levels of exhaustion are hardly noticeable, high levels are extremely rare and extremely severe, and the order is not memorable, so it slows down the game every time you need to reference the exhaustion table when it does come up. Now, the latest 1D&D playtest doc has completely rewritten exhaustion, and this was a pleasant surprise because I don't think any of us really saw it coming. Exhaustion was such an underused mechanic that it just didn't matter for it to be bad, but the designers saw this as an opportunity to turn it into something simple, fun, and functional, and I think they deserve some praise for this one. The exhausted condition. While you are subjected to the exhausted condition, known in older books as exhaustion, you experience the following effects. Levels of exhaustion. This condition is cumulative. Each time you receive it, you gain 1 level of exhaustion. You die if your exhaustion level exceeds 10. D20 rolls affected. When you make a D20 test, you subtract your exhaustion level from the D20 roll. Spell save DC is affected. Subtract your exhaustion level from the spell save DC of any spell you cast. Ending the condition. Finishing a long rest removes 1 of your levels of exhaustion. When your exhaustion level reaches 0, you are no longer exhausted. Each level of exhaustion equals a -1 from your D20 rolls and spell save DC. That's easy to memorize. You probably already have it locked in, and it scales in this perfectly predictable linear pattern from 1 to 10 without any unnecessary changes to your speed or radical shifts like cutting your max HP in half. Not gonna lie, the death part still feels pretty sudden, and I think I'd like it more if it were just falling unconscious at level 10, kind of forcing you to take a long rest and reduce that level back to 9, but then you might end up in a weird loop between 9 and 10, and that doesn't really make sense either. Overall though, this version of Exhausted makes it much easier for dungeon masters to implement as a consequence in the game. We don't know for sure yet, but I assume you'll still get a level of exhaustion for not resting, not eating, and maybe 2 or 3 levels for not drinking water each day. But the penalties to rolls make more sense for me for extreme heat and cold, and it allows me to add in a reasonable penalty for dropping to 0 hit points in combat. I'd probably go with 1 level of exhaustion for dropping to 0, plus 1 for each failed death save. That way, after a battle where 1 or 2 PCs go down, the party will probably need to rest for more than the usual 1 night to recover. And as another idea, I like the possibility of 1D&D's exhaustion being used to represent luck, which is often its own stat in some other games like Dungeon Crawl Classics and Call of Cthulhu, where in this case, a player character can experience bad luck as levels of exhaustion, creating minor penalties to their rolls. So if you like this new rule, remember to like this video, share it with a friend, take the 1D&D survey on October 20th, and stay tuned for an upcoming video about the 1D&D rule that does actually worry me a little bit. Thanks for your support, and keep building.